Hi, hello. I am Thomas Aquilina, and welcome to Bedtime Stories. I hope you can hear me. I am a London based designer invested in building communities of radical thought and progressive practice. I currently work for Ajay Associates, tutor for new architecture writers, and am a founding member of After Party, a publishing collective focused on race and space. I'd like to thank both Alicia Pivaro and Rosie Gibbs Stevenson for the invitation to read this evening. And as well, I'm sending good vibrations to my father, who has just downloaded Instagram and is watching this from his hospital bed after major neurosurgery. Tonight I will read 5 of my vignettes, each describing different rhythms of city life in downtown Kampala. Kampala is the East African capital of Uganda and is located in an infrastructurally challenging terrain of hills and swamps. At the time of independence in 1962, the city was spread across 7 hills, but it has since grown exponentially to cover more than 24 peaks. So this is Kampala. Although home to a modest population of 1.7 million, the city has a density of about 8,000 inhabitants per kilometre squared. Each of my short texts intend to reflect on a present everyday condition while drawing on historical relationships of the city. This crossover between how the city was intended and how the city is used today is a reoccurring theme. There are also objects that will repeat themselves too, particularly the ever-present motorcycle taxis known locally as boda bodas. The term is an adaptation of the word border, referring to this cross-border movement that these taxi agents make, and since have become a really important form of public transport in the city. Across these short texts, the experience of the city will be framed by movement, and movement in different directions, ascending Kampala's hills, crossing the railway tracks, navigating between arcade buildings, vending on the street, as well as going nowhere at downtown traffic jams. Ultimately, the city, I hope, is recorded as a circuit made up of actors, of spaces, of resources and their limits, of resourcefulness and its limits, and of key individuals. So if you're ready, we'll get right into the readings. I'm going to begin with this piece. A ruler's broad-brimmed hat. At a downtown junction, where the defunct railway line meets the main road artery, the traffic halts. There are loud sirens and fast-moving vehicles with flashing lights. Even the boda bodas observe the warning, pulling over. No ambulance, no police chase. It is the President's Convoy, an endless stream of motorcycles, followed by black-buffed Mercedes-Benz, known as Black Mambas, and tailed by pickup trucks packed with army officers. It's an imposing and intimidating sight. I've lost count of all the vehicles that have passed, but another passerby says she's tallied 40. I expect the president is returning from his state house in Entebbe, or the airport in the same old colonial capital until 1962. The convoy is afforded only one route into Kampala, along a paved single carriageway that guides all traffic through the city. Peering Through a backseat window is the president, wearing a floppy yellow broad-brimmed hat. The yellow signifies his political party, the National Resistance Movement. Not quite the same yellow as the enforcement officers on the streets of the city. It is the beginning of a presidential election season, and the president is eyeing a 5th term in office. He ascended into power as a guerrilla fighter some 30 years ago. Today, he is fighting public opinion. He recently came 6th in a Forbes list of the world's 10 worst dictators. He must have an addiction to attention. From where I'm standing, conspicuous graffiti stands out. The president's face with the words, "No change." Some things, however, are fast changing. The country's urban population has tripled during Kampala's population during the president's reign. Under his relaxed regulatory framework, Motorbike Drivers, those spatial geniuses, constitute as much as a third of the city's population. And as the convoy finally passes, the growing fleet of Motorbikers compete for first position in the subsequent traffic jam. Okay, second text. 2 storks on a lamppost. The motorbike driver maneuvers through the traffic, which is at a standstill, flouting rules by climbing curbs and squeezing through space where nobody has ever squeezed through. The driver has a mobile phone pressed against his left ear and the inside of his helmet. He is listening to the news via the phone radio. His style of riding can only be described as freestyle. He overtakes vehicles on the inside and outside, all for a couple thousand shillings. During a Bora Bora ride, time is compressed. There is no delay, no signal warning failure, no regard for stoplights. And even with my house on a hilltop, the rat-a-tat of a motorbike is never far away. I haven't had to walk any further than the distance I'd run to catch a bus. My sense of time and space, and time and distance, is warped. These maverick drivers are spatial geniuses, and their swiftness is a mismatch with the otherwise laboured pace of city life in Kampala. The driver agrees to our request to drive along the neglected railway line while Eric takes a ride to record the journey with a camera. Churchill once heralded the completion of this single-track line as a landmark, notoriously termed the Lunatic Express, which linked Uganda's interior with Kenya's coast. The motorbike speeds along the line, cutting through a spilling market. The track is a magnet for vendors. The vendors are targets for the city authorities, which want to clear them from the railway corridor. Every now and then, a freight train will pass, but pedestrians move on foot. The driver manipulates a soggy section of the track beneath a small road bridge, and once he gets through, they're out of sight. But on the bridge, perched atop a tall lamppost, are 2 storks. These imposing and unflinching figures see everything from above. Okay, the third text, third of 5. Headless Mannequins on the ground floor. In the early 20th century, literary critic Walter Benjamin wrote about the covered shopping arcades of Paris. In these glass-roofed marble-paneled corridors. The street and interior merge. Customers find everything they want from the city in one building. An arcade is a world in miniature. The effect on Benjamin was profound. His sense of time distorted and his vision distracted. In Kampala today, I am fascinated by a building typology known locally as arcades too, albeit distinctive to the Parisian version. At first glance, they appear like any other nondescript plaza or multi-story mall, only without any visible communal space or any space for an elevator. These are ordinary buildings, but specific to their city. The downtown landscape is dominated by them. They have simple exteriors, but intricate plans, where passages function like internal streets, extending through whole blocks of buildings and sometimes deviating to connect other buildings. Some of these arcades extrude to 13 stories. Most of them have a double height entrance, and all are circulated via elaborate staircases, a tangle of overlapping and intertwining lengths which make you end up in unexpected locations. The downtown retains its inheritance, a rigid colonial urban street plan, but the arcades impose a second street pattern onto the city, similar to a medieval herringbone layout. Inside the arcades, a variety of vendors are accommodated in small commercial units, their products all separated by specific floors. Hair items, jewelry, clothes, wedding accessories, mobile banking, film rentals and home furniture. Space for a ground floor unit is most sought after and often shared with peculiar, pale, headless mannequins. Benjamin's flaneur, I suspect, would be seduced by this urban scenario. Okay. The fourth text of 5. A man behind a wire mesh fence. Outside a large shopping mall, a shoe shiner works behind a wire mesh fence. Customers toss their shoes over to him, restricted and alone inside a large vacant scrubland. He scrubs and shines each shoe vigorously before lobbing them back to the customer like a rally in volleyball. Sebwa says the city authorities will remove and fine him if he returns to his more prominent downtown location. For the last 3 years, the council has attempted various crackdowns to evict vendors, but every street corner in this city continues to host the people who deal in small margins. News vendors, watch repairers, stamp makers, shoe shiners, mobile telecom sellers. These curbside economies and their vagrant operators are regarded by the council as risks and inconveniences, hard-worn habitats viewed as aesthetic eyesores. The authorities' guidelines require all vendors to operate inside formal kiosks constructed of fiberglass and aluminium fabrics. But this fabrication does not account for the inherent agility of vendors, let alone their persistence and discipline. Sebwa is like most vendors, who cannot afford a trading license. However, he compensates for his moment of use, often paying local goons who claim a right of being interim tax police officers. There are other important currencies in this trade too. alerting customers to local gossip, rumours or tip-offs. These imposed limits force Cebuwa to exist in a no-man's territory, amid different regimes of land and local political control. But its vibrancy also ensures an imagination required for escape. Okay. And so, to end this bedtime stories, I'm going to read one more vignette. Here we go. Vendors under candlelight. A game of cat and mouse is underway in the downtown. Both opponents are easily recognizable. The Kampala City Authority, wearing yellow uniform shirts, and the street traders carrying their stuffed cardboard trays. It has just gone midday, peak time for this chase. The authority enforcement officers flood the streets on patrol. Some of their pickup trucks already filled with vendors' goods. But there seems only a handful of seizures. Most vendors have thwarted their opponent and vacated the old taxi park, not only the major minibus terminus, but also a convertible vending marketplace. A few months ago, the thick band of timber kiosks surrounding the park's perimeter were bulldozed. The main device for vendors is a chart box, a shallow container with a raised rim made out of cardboard, usually no larger than a board to play games. The box is filled with single items of stationery, toiletries, cigarettes, soaps, fruits, and foodstuffs. Each vendor also carries prepaid scratch airtime slips to load credit onto a mobile phone, the basic unit. Kampala feels less tolerant to people on the street than during my first visit here 2 years ago. The city authority insistent in their efforts to clean and control the urban landscape. Their latest policy permits vending along Lewum Street, but on Sundays only. The contest carried out on the streets daily is also being performed at a higher level. The president recently issued an order to allow vendors to resume trade-in, but this is a politics of manipulation, despite the city authorities' strict control. By twilight, the yellow vests have disappeared, and the old taxi park is fully occupied by vendors. Nearly all the women, mainly selling fruits. Each vendor has a small candle wrapped by a plastic bag that forms a vase to light up their display. Other lights are being emitted from minibus headlamps and shop signs in neon lettering. During these hours of darkness and the fall of shadows, the city runs naturally, almost like Chrysophiles' Blue Rider paintings, with an extremely limited palette of oversaturated blues and blacks. The night swallows the city. Thanks for watching and for listening. I hope that was okay. And good night to you all. Thank you.